Welcome to the Community Partnerships in Action stream. This is our second session for the day, the title being Collaborating to Create Koala Corridors in Kurrajong. And I'd just like to introduce you to the guest speaker, Katherine Clare from Hawkesbury Nepean Landcare Network. Thank you.
All right. So good afternoon, everyone. It's really nice to get to speak about this project because it's one we've been running for 2 years. It's very close to my heart. Anyone who came to the excursion yesterday would know that. So I'm going to quickly just today go over a bit about the catchment that this project is located in, give you an overview of the project and the outcomes, and then the focus of today was to talk to you about why we invested in building the capacity of our community and the value of the partnerships that came out of this project. So firstly, Hawkesbury Nepean Landcare Network covers 4 government areas, and the Kurrajong Koala Corridor is located in Hawkesbury, which is the LGA outlined in black, and it's in that roughly where that black square is. It's a big area. But of course, before you start talking about koala corridors, you need to know about the local population of koalas first. So the Blue Mountains Hawkesbury koala population are one of the most genetically diverse in Australia, but unfortunately they are affected by many threats, including being affected by chlamydia, habitat loss from deforestation, development, as well as fragmentation. There are a lot of major roads through their wide range, and when you've got a population that's very mobile, that puts them under a lot of stress. And of course, the catchment itself, so whenever you're focusing on one species, you're inevitably helping others. And Little Wheeny Creek is an amazing catchment. It's very high in biodiversity. It's a wildlife superhighway rich in Aboriginal cultural heritage, which is the local Darug people there. And it's got a lot of threatened ecological communities as well, which I'll list a little bit later on. But the value of this project is, while we've been focusing on koalas, we've actually focused on a lot of other beautiful aspects of the catchment too. This one. Okay, so the project, I'm going to not look at the slides. The project itself, so this is stage 1. We had 13 properties involved in stage 1. It's a cross-catchment management project. So what that means is we have 13 landholders working together on their properties to deliver outcomes such as replanting or restoring koala habitat. And you can see there that they're all connected along Little Wheeny Creek, which I'm not sure if you can see the blue line, but it runs from the north, so the top right corner, to the south of the map. The properties in red are properties that were originally interested but retracted their interest in the end, and the properties in blue are people that already had grants and continued them individually, or local parks. So essentially properties that still form part of the Koala Corridor but just were not funded through this project stage. And we're just about to finish stage 2, so I put a map in there anyway, stage 2, so you can see how the project's expanded. The green properties are the new properties that are now part of the project, which is fantastic. We've got a few of them here today. And the sign on the left is a sign that we developed for our landholders at the end of stage 1, just as a bit of a recognition. So, an overview of the project. Like I said, it involved 13 landholders working together to restore Koala Corridor. So we're talking about revegetation and bush regeneration, so removing weeds. And inevitably that included restoring and enhancing a lot of the endangered ecological communities in that area. The ones that we have in the area specifically are Western Sydney dry rainforest, shale turpentine ironbark transition forest, and a few others, but those were the 2 focused ones on our properties. And of course, we've got koalas in the region as well as a lot of other threatened species. So a really nice project overall. It's funded through, still is through stage 2, funded through a regional partnership with Greater Sydney Local Land Services. So for those of you that don't know, GSLLS, Greater Sydney Local Land Services, offer funding or incentive funding for landholders in the area. That means they can approach them, say, look, I'd like some help with this. Maybe it's stock fencing, maybe it's weed removal, and they can go through the process of receiving a grant. Now, when you have 13 landholders that are all bordering one another, that's a lot of administration work. So what we did was Hawkesbury Nepean Landcare Network applied on behalf of all of the 13 landholders for a lump sum of money. And as a result of that, we were actually allowed to wager or bargain to have funding put towards community capacity building. Workshops that would train our landholders to be able to carry out their in-kind a lot better and would also keep them connected. Because unlike most landcare groups, these landholders aren't meeting at the same site, say monthly or bi-monthly. They're working on their own properties. So we still needed a way to make sure that they stayed together, and the community capacity funding was the best way to do that. But it wasn't something that the landholders would have had access to if they'd only had an individual grant, because this is NRM funding. So if they'd all had individual grants with LLS, it wouldn't have given them a chance to get funding for training and skills. It's one of the biggest benefits out of this partnership. And one of the other biggest benefits, which we weren't expecting, was because the landholders were working together under an established program and project, we were a recognised hub or body that people could contact us for and say, look, we've got trees, we'd like to do some planting, or we've got some youth, we'd really love to run a workshop, can we help you out? And so we had a lot of collaboration and interest that we hadn't expected in the past. And again, something that the landholders wouldn't have really been able to tap into, at least not at the scale that we could help them with for this project, had they been working on their own. Whoa, yeah, oh, okay, I can use a keyboard, great. So I thought generally, because we like to talk about outcomes, I'm not a numbers person, but it is important to put up there. So the project covered just under 62 hectares with about 1.7 hectares of revegetation or replanting, focusing on pest management, and we had 6 community capacity events. I'll admit this is not as many as we expected to have or had budgeted for, but our partnerships allowed us to run a few extra, and the project was meant to be 12 to 16 months and ended up being closer to 2 years as a result of all the disruptions we had with bushfires, floods and COVID. So we needed to run extra events to make sure that we were still keeping our community connected. But the biggest thing I really want to highlight with this slide is the value of the project. As you can see, the funding for the project was just over $47,000, but the value of the project was closer to $103,500. That's all from in-kind, mostly from volunteer hours, either from our community members and our landholders, but also from the partnerships that we were able to leverage. So around $14,700 worth of our in-kind came from additional partnerships that we hadn't anticipated. People that provided trees, ran workshops for us, were happy to have an extra staff member out there at an event. And it all really added up. But again, it's something that was a result of the partnership and investing in the community. When they feel like you invest in them, like that you can train them, they're more confident to carry out their work on their own, and they will. They'll go above and beyond to help their properties, especially when they've got the skills to do it, which we help them provide. So just a quick snapshot, because it's nice to see some pictures of the on-ground work, even if that's not the focus of today. So this is an example of revegetation. Those are 2 neighbouring properties. And if you can picture in your mind, on the property on the right, there's actually a large Western Sydney dry rainforest gully right behind it. So what this on-ground work is doing is it's restoring an area that had been cleared. This was previously a dairy farm, to connect the gully behind to the bushland below and to the properties adjoining it that had bushland. Anyone who was there yesterday would know how great it was. And then this is an example of enhancing and improving koala corridors. So koalas can't really move through really dense vegetation, but they do move on the ground, not between trees, unlike gliders. So it's important that they can have access to move through, and privet creates a major problem. So on this property, this is Kate's, it's such a lovely place, we were able to remove the privet and allow for natural regeneration. The photo on the right is actually about 12 months old, so it's the end of stage 1 project. If you were to visit that site today, you wouldn't even recognise it. The amount of natural recruitment that we've had just from the species in the soil bank is absolutely incredible. We're getting a real idea of what the Western Sydney dry rainforest looked like before the lantana came in. And as a result, we're also seeing an increase in the native species that rely on it. Now, before I move on to my next slide, because it looks a bit crazy, what I did was, while this project came together rather organically, there were some key steps that we focused on. So I've put together a little bit of a model which has some key kind of outcomes or principles you need to focus on if we're going to run a project similar to this. The project really started because there was a common cause. So a lot of these landholders already knew each other. They'd been running projects on weeds in the area, but they hadn't really formed as a group. And then the threat came of the Bells Line of Road Castlereagh connection, which was basically going to put a road through all of these properties. It was going to clear out this Western Sydney dry rainforest, fragment an already fragmented koala corridor. And the landholders were really quite concerned with what this would do, both to their properties but to the wildlife in the area that they loved so much. So after that, we had a champion, the brilliant Gary Waterson, who contacted Landcare and encouraged others to get involved as well. And through that, he was able to rope a group together. He had a Christmas party where everyone spoke about it on the street. And then that led directly to a collaboration with Landcare and Greater Sydney Local Land Services. So we all went, we can do this. This is something we should do as well. But in order to do that, we had to have, sorry, I skipped a step. We had to have the community really build together. So after the Christmas party, we spent time, and I wasn't a part of this, so the previous coordinators, Wayla Sledge and LLS officer Angie Fricker, were part of this. Running a bus tour for those who were kind of interested but hadn't quite been sold, or were like, what exactly does it mean if I'm going to get a grant or I'm going to be part of a group, to meet others who already had grants with LLS and see what it was like, to meet the people that they were going to really commit to a project with. And so we started developing that greater sense of community around a common cause, with a champion really holding everyone together, especially at the start. And that led to our collaboration for funding, which I've already explained. And once we got the funding and kicked off the project, it should have run smoothly, but as you all know, nothing ever really runs to textbook book. You really require consistency, and that is consistent support of your landholders, consistent check-ins, consistent follow-ups when something hasn't been done, but also providing consistent opportunities for them to connect and learn with one another. And that is why we have so much community capacity funding and why we focus on it so much. Speaking of, so we had 3 ways that we built the community of our capacity. 1, we focused on the landholders. We then had to focus on keeping them connected through COVID and disasters. And then we had to focus on the community at large. So I've already spoken about why we did property walks and talks, radio, to share knowledge. We had to focus on teaching them monitoring points. I realised halfway through the project when we asked for photo monitoring points of their in-kind work that wasn't a skill landholders had, so I couldn't use any of the photos I was sent because I got like the log here, the tree here, and then it was over there, and I was like, that's not okay. So we spent some time setting up points, and it's a fact sheet we now included in stage 2 for all of our landholders. A really good skill. I really highly recommend, if you aren't sure whether your land carers have this skill, please invest in it because it helps them whether or not they have funding. And then we connected them to researchers and held talks where they could get up-to-date research about the koalas and the species that they're working so hard to protect but may not often see. I'll skim over this really quickly in the interest of time, but we had to keep our community connected. As I said, we had a lot of disturbances, which really at one point meant no one could see each other, no contractors could be on the ground. So we got a little bit creative and we set up a private Landcare group on Facebook with the contractors included, so any questions could be answered directly by their contractors. But of course not everyone uses social media, and some other groups have preferred WhatsApp, but we still had to include regular emails. Once COVID and everything lightened up, we gently returned with just very casual cup of coffee, no work involved, just a way for people to ease in at a time that they felt necessary. Next we focused on building the community as well. I'll skip over this as well because we're running out of time. But we had peer-to-peer mentoring with the youth, which was also a working bee on one of the properties. And then we had a project wrap-up, which was another meet and greet for the broader community outside of the specific small group. A chance to just chat and find out about Landcare. And then we got signs for recognition. Also meant people were connected, but they're on those gates, and if you ever drive past, you'll see them. It's a great way of creating awareness, but also that sense of feeling good about something that we're all doing together. A couple of the discoveries we made, just really quickly, we discovered scrub turpentine, or Rhodamnia rubescens, which is an endangered turpentine species. Very exciting to discover, but it took us 12 property walks to discover it and actually identify it, as well as a lot of the other wildlife you see there and our beloved koalas. Now, I've really already kind of nutted out what we did with our partnerships and benefits, but if you wanted to see an outline of who did what, this is that. Like I said, we didn't create extra work for one another. Landcare did what we do best, which is keeping people connected and helping them with information. LLS provided the funding and helped us with really good local knowledge and mapping systems. But of course, neither of that would have happened without the LSC, my role as a local Landcare coordinator there, which is something that Landcare New South Wales provides and the Hawkesbury River County Council provide. So if you want to know why you need an LLC in the area, I don't think there's a better argument to make. And then, of course, this is also a partnership with the landholders, especially the ones who are new to Landcare. They're really trusting you to help them with their properties. It's a big thing to do. But because of this partnership, they didn't have to worry about the admin, they didn't have to worry about the reporting. We made things really easy for them and they got to focus on what they wanted to do best, which is working on their own properties and learning alongside a contractor, alongside one another, and growing a movement. And as a result of that, they have grown the interest in the area for Landcare beyond what I could have ever expected. There are some other partnerships there which we were able to access, but I'll leave that in the interest of time. So if I go back to the additional outcomes, think about this one. We then had our community outcomes. They were connected and supported. Can I have 1 minute? They were connected and supported. They came out as skilled, confident landholders who, whether or not we get funding, we know they have the skills to continue what they're doing and they don't need me there all the time. Of course, I'm there to support them, but essentially they support one another. And that is the biggest power that we've given to this community and that they can do in growing the Landcare movement. I'll skip over experiences and feedback and leave you, oh no, that's not, with the final takeaways, which is leverage your partnerships with others, but work to your own capacity. Don't make extra work for one another. We didn't do that. What we did was we delivered a project that neither organisation could have delivered on its own at all. Wouldn't have happened. I didn't have to go and learn extra new skills, nor did GSLLS, so it was within our range. And when you build a community, the capacity of a community, you inevitably end up with a stronger, more powerful community. Thank you. I'll let you go.
What a great example of a partnership project where you've actually now got community capacity to actually go further, because everybody is very trusting and they've got runs on the board and overall terrifically positive.
It's fantastic. And I must admit, like even at the excursion yesterday, once you cue them to start talking about it, that's it. Like I don't even need to talk about it. Like they run the show themselves because it's their project now. We just help them get it started.
Such a great sign of a really good project, isn't it? Yeah. A couple of questions. Yep. This is for our not our virtual visitors too. So virtual delegates, if they can also go on Slido and ask a question, and we'll ask it for you then.
Thank you. Karen Zerkler from Southern New England Landcare. We're running a big project, a koala project as well at the moment. Your project is a fantastic, well done. Just a detailed question actually.
Yeah.
You talked about the in-kind, measuring the in-kind of the landholders. What sort of dollar value do you put on the hourly, what sort of hourly rate do you
So that's because it's a land services grant, they predetermine the cost of everything. So the cost of what a plant costs, a metre of fencing, bush regeneration hours cost. So for volunteers, it's $35 an hour.
It's great to have something that is just like a standard.
I would love to put $45.
Yeah, I was going to say I put $45 an hour in on the bushfire ones.
I reckon we could bump it up now that we know they're skilled as well.
Inflation.
Definitely.
I mean, you've got to get it up there.
Yep.
Thanks. Hi, Jim Kincaid, New South Wales North Coast Regional Landcare. You mentioned in your additional outcomes reduction in bell miner activity.
Yeah.
Do you put that down to a couple of key things that you did in the project? And I must apologise, I missed the beginning of your presentation. You may have covered that.
We found mostly the removal of lantana across the properties where the understory had been lantana and that was taken away. The bell miner activity dropped significantly.
Right, so you took the lantana completely away, or did you take sections or hedge it, or...?
In areas where we had a well-established understory and tall shrubs, we took it completely away because we still had that habitat and neighbouring habitat around. In areas where it was still quite open, the lantana was killed but left in situ, so it was still habitat. So in those
Right.
areas, there's still a bit of the activity, but still far reduced to what it was previously.
Excellent, thanks.
Yeah, another question.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm from ACT Parks and Cons. I guess I'm just curious, when this kind of first came up as a potential project idea to kind of getting community involved in that, like how long did that process take and what were some of your key, I guess, challenges and learnings out of that?
So that was slightly before my time. I kind of came in when we got the funding. But from what I understand, 8 months. They already knew each other. It was just a matter of organising the events to get everyone together and see each other's properties and build confidence in being like part of a Landcare thing. And they didn't establish as a Landcare group until the end of this stage. So it took 2 years for us to all go, rightio, you want stage 2? Like, should we be a group? And they went, yeah, no, we'll be a group. And so now they're a formalised group. So if you do that, probably closer to 2.5 years with all the disruptions we had.
Any more questions? Yes, one at the back.
Thank you. Don Ferris from Hunter. We've got a lot of land on koala habitat, so we're going to look to replicate something like this with our neighbours. Did you have many examples of neighbours working on each other's properties, and what were the insurance implications and that sort of thing?
Plenty, yeah. Stage 1, obviously with COVID, a lot of people couldn't, but we did, and currently now the landholders will just go, I'm planting my plants today, who wants to come over, morning tea's offered. And so in stage 2, we've had a lot more regularity in landholders visiting. It tends to be about 8 people that rock up each time for 3 or 4 hours. So yes, we have. Stage 1 limited by COVID, but people still visited a lot of the events, and it was still at least 7 to 10 people when we could do it.
We'll just take the last question I saw a hand up for, and then we're going to break for lunch.
Okay.
Oh, is there a question?
There is a question online.
I was just interested, Nick Stevens from South Gippsland Landcare, just interested to get an idea in terms of your own time, was that costed as part of the project or?
Yes, it was.
And I guess if you sort of drew a line from hours, did it sort of reduce? It seems to suggest, you often need to put a lot of effort at the beginning and then it kind of drops off over time as things get going.
Yeah, correct. So there's a big input at the start, especially when you've got new landholders, as these were all new landholders, so they all needed a project plan. So a lot of time spent visiting, writing up maps, taking them through everything. It dropped off a lot, and then we had to pick it up a lot because of COVID and reconnecting. So in stage 2, which is a better example of things running smoothly, it was a lot less. All our new landholders didn't really need new maps. Our current landholders, our new landholders did, but didn't take that much time, and they're all next to each other, so there's no driving time between. And then it's run quite smoothly. So my hours at the start, the first month, you probably average 5 a week, and then now it's more like 2 to 3 a fortnight, including when we run events. So I don't work on this every week. The landholders have control of it. They do what they need to.
That's really great to hear about that too. We have had one question that I would like to just read out from our online delegates. Is the area being regenerated for the Koala Corridors still threatened by the proposed highway?
We got given the assurance that the highway wouldn't happen, but the landholders were asked that doesn't necessarily protect them from any other kind of proposed development. The properties are too small to be listed under conservation agreements with the BCT, so the best they can do is land for wildlife, but that's still not a solid conservation status. And because the koala population in Hawkesbury is not actually recognised in the koala strategy at the moment, that again poses extra challenges to maintaining, to protecting the habitat there.
So not an immediate threat, and certainly it's better when you've got a whole group of landholders who are working together and who've actually done on-ground works.
Definitely. I think because it's a well-known project, a lot more voices would arc up about it if it happened than would have happened otherwise.
Well, thank you, Katherine. That was a really interesting presentation.